Alright, so before we get into Agatha All Along, and trust me, we will spend a good portion of today's episode talking about the first 2 episodes of Agatha All Along, let's talk about something else that's been going around recently. So, we've all heard the rumors for a long time, especially those of you who have been following the YouTube channel and have been following the Marvel rumors. Scarlet Witch, is she dead? Is she not dead? And this is nothing about the first 2 episodes of Agatha All Along. I would have been able to record this entire segment. I promise you, no spoilers. I would have been able to record this entire segment before I had even seen episodes 1 and 2. I'm going to record this as if I hadn't seen episodes 1 and 2. So we're just talking about the fact that, look, before even Agatha came out, we had all been wondering, after Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, is Elizabeth Olsen as the Scarlet Witch? Is she ever going to come back in any form? And is the character dead in the MCU? And there have been, kind of things here and there, right, that have maybe confirmed our suspicions and that maybe have tilted us away from it. So we have Elizabeth Olsen herself going on several interviews recently, and she's had a pretty, a good lineup of projects after WandaVision and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. But let's not kid ourselves. It's only been 2 years, so it's not like she, if she were to do another MCU project, and let's say she does show up in Agatha All Along at the very end or whatever as Scarlet Witch, it would have only been 2 years since she had last appeared as Wanda Maximoff. So let's not pretend that it's this big hiatus and, Robert Downey Jr. stepped away. He, probably by the time he shows up in maybe the Fantastic Four First Steps or in Avengers Doomsday, it will only have been maybe 6 or 7 years. And so it's not like it's been a 10-year hiatus or anything like that. But still, she's wanted to step away from the MCU after Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. That closed out her character and seemingly left her dead on Mount Wondergord, is what I believe that mountain's called. Anyways, so the character is now gone from the Earth 616 universe. Now, that never really predisposes a character from ever showing up again in the MCU. Captain America is still kicking around, and we have obviously Tony Stark and all these other villains that kind of show up again. Red Skull showed up again. So, we have all these different avenues for a character to show up. And so, like I said, Elizabeth Olsen has been going on talk shows recently and been saying, yeah, look, I'd be very open to coming back as Wanda Maximoff, as Scarlet Witch, when previously she had been saying things like, well, I think the time is over and whatnot. So who knows about that? And then recently, the reason that it prompted me to talk about this at all in the first place is that the showrunner of Agatha All Along, and I believe one of the head writers, if not the head writer of WandaVision, Jack Schaefer, was on the red carpet of Agatha All Along, and she basically said, we're really hoping that we're going to get that Scarlet Witch movie, and she didn't really confirm anything or not. So that's, this segment isn't really about news. It's not really me saying, hey, look at, we have signs that a Scarlet Witch movie is coming. It's not like the Ted Lasso segment I did a couple weeks ago where I was like, well, it kind of does look like Ted Lasso season 4 is on its way. This is me just more saying, okay, well, let's talk about what this could mean for the MCU if this were to happen. So, is a Scarlet Witch movie? Because I think, well, let's first back up a little bit. So Scarlet Witch movie is an assumption in itself. Let's just talk about the fact that, is Scarlet Witch coming back into the MCU a good idea? And then I guess secondly to that, is a Scarlet Witch movie a good idea? So I can pretty much bundle those two answers in one for me personally, because I think it just depends on everyone else. But I'm going to try to give some reasons also holistically for the MCU why I think that, I think the way that I think. Is bringing Elizabeth Olsen back as the Scarlet Witch a good idea? I'm going to say no. And I'm not saying this, trust me, if you've watched the channel for a long period of time, you'll know that I am one of those people who am obsessed with WandaVision. I don't think many people would even agree with me on this, even people who love WandaVision. But WandaVision to me is top 2 MCU ever. It's Infinity War for me, and it's WandaVision. I think WandaVision is just that good. And I loved Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch and pretty much everything else she's been in Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame. Obviously, she had a great little performance. I say little just because of the amount of screen time that she gave, but obviously, we all remember her moments with Thanos in there. And Infinity War, she just broke my heart at the very end with Vision, and WandaVision just killed it. And I'm a fan of Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. I don't think it's the greatest thing ever made, but I think it has some really fun moments in there. You can go check out my rewatch of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness right here on the channel. But look, I'm one of those people who also thinks that the whole idea of Wanda Maximoff, quote-unquote, breaking bad in Doctor Strange 2 as the villain, I mean, we can all have this conversation about whether or not they should have done it because, it seemed like a lot of people were kind of confused because they hadn't seen WandaVision going into Doctor Strange 2, so that's a whole different conversation. But I'm just talking about every single canonical appearance of Wanda Maximoff and her character arc. And I have been on record of saying it made total sense to me. It made complete and total sense to me that she went the direction that she wanted. Because, look, you have this character who people were saying that the main argument that I've heard, at least, against this is that in WandaVision, she completed her arc, right? She went through the processes of grief and everything like that. And so it doesn't make sense to just all of a sudden pivot her back to being a villain. Well, I would argue a couple things there. I think, first of all, I don't think that her journey was complete in WandaVision. I think actually if you watch the show until the very end, you'll remember that at the very end of the show, this is a character who, yes, has maybe atoned for, not even atoned, what's the right word? She has found some remorse for what she has done, and she's trying to find her way back, right? But this is a character who is still clearly dealing with grief, right? I mean, she's had to let go everything for the greater good, and she's had her hero moment, but I think it still makes sense that, okay, she's like, I understand this is all hurting people, and this is all me, but then at the very end, she finds the Darkhold, and she's messing with the Darkhold, and that's a moment when she can realize, wait, I don't need to, quote-unquote, hurt anybody, going through the multiverse and finding other versions of my kids. I can just find my kids, and that becomes an all-consuming thing for her. So that's point number one, being that I don't think her arc was necessarily complete in WandaVision. I think that she went through a very beautiful transformation and went through a lot of really emotional stages through in her life and in her processing of all the terrible and traumatic things that have happened to her. But I think also number two, that it makes total sense that if that, again, grief is not a binary thing. It doesn't just go away. That's really what my point is there. And so if you had the opportunity, right, to, you kind of think one door is shut, but then all of a sudden it's like, well, there was a chance you could bring your kids back. I definitely think that it makes total sense that she would come back. I do think, however, that whatever you think about the execution of the character in Doctor Strange, I mean that, I guess I mean that in the sense of the execution of the character arc, but also literally the death of the character. But, whatever you think about the way that they handled Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and I definitely think that, they could have spent a little bit more time with her in the film rather than just making her a generic horror villain or whatever at certain points. I think that they definitely could have fleshed out her motivations a little bit more. But I do think that just on paper, the character arc makes total sense, that she finally is confronted with what she's wanted this whole time, and her kids are terrified of her because they kind of see her as a monster. She's kind of become that character who chased the dream so much that she lost herself in it. I think that's actually quite interesting. I don't think it's as interesting as WandaVision. I think by killing her at the end, her making the ultimate sacrifice play, it's again showing her that she is a true hero at heart and not, just an evil villain for the sake of being an evil villain. And I think that that's really good. So in the one sense, right, I talked about this like a little bit ago that, is it a good idea to bring back Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch? I don't think so, because I think that her character arc has come to a natural conclusion. Now, people can argue, okay, well, what about the multiverse and all that kind of stuff? Again, I have always been hesitant. The reason I'm so pro Robert Downey Jr. returning, not as Tony Stark, although he could be a Tony Stark variant for all we know, but not as Tony Stark, but as Victor Von Doom for the moment. And why, spoiler alert for Deadpool and Wolverine, I was very happy that Chris Evans was able to return as the Human Torch, is because the idea of, in Secret Wars, a giant portal opening up a la Spider-Man No Way Home, and guess what? Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. show up, and it's not the exact versions from the Earth 616 universe, but it's basically the same, and they're just showing up because they're showing up. I think the idea of that is really ridiculous and kind of silly. I think that, they're making interesting ways for these actors to show up again. And so if there's a way for Elizabeth Olsen as an actress to show up again, and even, things like I would not be opposed for her filming new scenes as flashbacks for the Vision series, for example. That's great. That's totally fine. It seems like a little bit of a waste of the actress to kind of just have her come back, Elizabeth Olsen, who I think is one of the most talented and really charismatic actresses in the business today. Just having her film some flashback scenes as a little bit of a cameo, if it serves the story, then that's great. But I think it's a little bit of a waste. But I think on the whole, for me personally, and for the MCU as a whole, I think we're kind of, I think we've wrapped up the Wanda Maximoff storyline. I think that we've told a lot that there has been to tell. Obviously, people are kind of, we're kind of hoping for House of M more in WandaVision. We didn't really get that, but I think, again, even if we're just bringing back the 3/8 version of Wanda, for example, I just think that's a little bit lazy and a little bit like, well, we kind of killed one of them, but we can always start over. And I think that is part of the danger of having the multiverse around, just to have these cop-outs. And I think so far with the cameos, apologies, by the way, for the siren in the background, my goodness, but anyways, like I was saying, I think for the most part they've handled the cameos pretty well. I think, the Illuminati, they were kind of fun in Doctor Strange 2, but I'm talking more Tobey Maguire, I'm talking Andrew Garfield, Chris Evans as the Human Torch, for example, all the, I don't know what you call them, the Anarchy Avengers or whatever they were in Deadpool and Wolverine, and then, Robert Downey Jr. potentially coming back. It's not a cameo, he's the big bad of the Multiverse saga, apparently. I think that they've handled them fairly well. So I would just be a little bit hesitant because of how well I personally think they handled the Wanda Maximoff arc in the MCU. But you'll have to let me know in the comments down below. Maybe you completely disagree with me, and maybe you think they should totally be making a Scarlet Witch movie. And yeah, I guess that's the second point I should address quickly, is just, I think that if you're going to bring her back, I don't necessarily think we need an entire movie. I think we've had entire show, an entire movie where she was the main villain. I don't see it, but maybe you guys do, so let me know in the comments down below.